Welcome to the Heavy Spoilers Show. I'm your host Paul, and in this video we're breaking down the boys. Whew. Just finished it, and yeah, gonna be difficult to talk about, but let's try not to get too tied up in those crusty details and break down the whole thing. Throughout this video, we're going to be going through the Easter eggs, hidden details, and callbacks to the comics. We'll also be talking about that big thing with Kessler, but the first rule of Kessler Club is that you don't talk about Kessler Club until after the spoiler alert. So here's your warning, and if you enjoy it, then please hit the thumbs up, and make sure you subscribe for our videos every week. With that out of the way, thank you guys for clicking this. Now let's get into the boys.
You are everything to me.
Now the first thing I want to talk about in this breakdown actually comes at the end of the episode. That's the reveal that Kessler's in fact all in Butcher's mind. It's a moment that's ripped right out of Fight Club, with the character simply being a hallucination. Now this is something we've seen with Butcher before, as he's heavily hallucinated Becca. There was also his younger brother Lenny, who appeared at moments during season 3. However, whereas these have been more positive forces, Kessler's an embodiment of his darker side. Now at the end of the video, we're going to have a big spoiler section where we talk about what happens in the comics. It has the potential to ruin the show and book for you though, so I'd rather save it until the end and give you a warning beforehand. However, I do think we're heading towards that, and Kessler's going to be a way to introduce it. Now the clues that he's not real are something that we've seen throughout the season, and even in episode 1 we got those Fight Club references. The entry started off with Kimiko in a tux pretending to be staff at a party. This is something that Tyler and the gang did, being a pretty clear reference to that movie. Beyond that though, we never saw Kessler interacting with anyone else other than Butcher. Even the drugs he brought Billy were placed on the counter rather than being handed over. Last week when Samir was in the barn, we also seen him giving a really puzzled look. Whenever Butcher spoke to Kessler, his expression made it seem like he was confused about who he was talking to, and in this episode we find out why. As for the future, I feel like the reason we have this weird thing inside of him could be down to the fact that he took V twice. We know that he initially took V24, which in the end caused a tumor. However, he also took another dose of regular V, which I think may have supercharged the disease. Saying that though, there was no evidence that the rabbit last week, Mr. Fuzzy Pussy, ended up taking V as well. However, it was in the lab with it, so yeah, maybe they injected it with both as well. Either way, that's a theater.
It may not be true, so don't hold me to it, mate. Just saying it's a theory, because it's worth talking about.
Now the reason I started by telling you all that stuff is because otherwise we'd be starting with a massive reach. However, Kessler does say,
"Wakey, wakey, eggs and bakey, mother."
Now, I'm pretty sure this is purely a British term, and I even went down the rabbit hole to double check. Kiora says the origins are unknown, though it is thought to be from Britain. Now why I'm bringing this up is because on a second watch that line really stood out to me, and it sounds more like something Butcher would say. Wakey wakey, Easter eggs and bakey. Now in the back we can see this is at Vought Fresh Farms, meaning that they're likely close by to where most of the boys' adventure took place at last week. That was a private estate, but this could be linked to the supply chain. Later on at the 7th Tower, the Deep brings up how Vought Fresh Farms were expanding into Indonesia. They sent Noir in to kill an entire fishing village who'd been complaining they needed the river to survive. Around 22 minutes, we also see Noir's used on an anti-union propaganda poster highlighting his ties to the company. Butcher also brought one of the infected sheep's heads along and gives Samir a week to manufacture the virus. Cutting back to New York, we see Huey scattering his dad's ashes outside the walled-off Astoria Hotel. This is part of a tour for Made in Manhattan, where Ray Fiennes' character told J-Lo he loved her or something. Dunno mate, not seen it, just what the tour says. Anyway, as they pass by a taxi, we see that Vought have now rolled out their Black Adder initiative. This was a corporate inclusivity move that was unveiled last week at V52. The black members of the team actually didn't get a say in it, and it was more using them as props for their corporate means. Mobbed in the street by someone wearing a red Make America Safe Again cap, you could sort of draw the conclusion about what that's about. This is also a slight callback to Gen V, as during that we saw Rufus wearing one. Victoria later has a similar debate about abortions, and she imagines popping her own head because she can't stand to be around these people. The stress is clearly getting to Annie, with her powers constantly shorting out. This was apparent last week, with it being psychosomatic. The idea of stress leading to performance issues has been touched upon in Spider-Man before, with it being a major part of Spider-Man 2. Now this video is sponsored by Fanhome, who've just launched their new unmissable Marvel Movies Replica magazine subscription. Obviously, you can tell I love collectibles, obviously mate, and this made it a must for me as I'm a massive Marvel fan. These replicas are instantly recognizable, and the Marvel movies replicas from Fanhome feature a range of recognizable objects from your favorite heroes and villains. Looks awesome, really well put together, and I can't wait to start collecting these Marvel movie replicas. You can subscribe to issue 1, and with that you'll get this awesome Iron Man Mark 85 helmet. It also comes with this magazine that contains a ton of trivia and information about its usage in the movie and comics. You've also got this giant collection guide as well, and that rolls out into a massive poster. It's also got loads of information on the back, and yeah, what a bloody bargain. Now if you subscribe today through my link in the description, you'll also get a free exclusive Iron Man shirt. It's for a limited time only, so yeah, go to that link in the description. On top of that, they've also told you what you're going to be getting across the first 5 issues. Next is Captain America's shield, which will then be followed by a Spider-Man helmet, Mjolnir, and Black Panther's helmet. On top of that, you'll also be getting extra size specials in issue 10, 18, 34, 46, and 65 respectively. These include things like Stormbreaker, the Infinity Gauntlet, and Hulkbuster helmet. They're made with metal and ABS, with the helmets being about 7 to 8.5 centimeters and the weapons being 10 to 11. These are really high quality productions, and the magazine and t-shirt make it a must buy. Again, go to my link in the description below and you'll get a 75% discount off the first issue. You can also choose the Fanhome Premium offer and add additional Iron Man helmets to your collection. So yeah, go to my link in the description below. So happy these guys are sponsoring the videos, and make sure you check out that amazing offer. Thanks. Cutting over to a Vernon Correctional Facility, we learn that this is a division of Vernon Corps. This actually foreshadows something we learn later on, as Tech Knight's real name's Robert Vernon. Made rich due to his ancestors' involvement in the slave trade, they then switched their business over to profit prisons. Set up after the burden on the public sector became too great, there are thought to be 8 to 10% of the prison population in private prisons. The controversy surrounding these is brought up in the episode, with it often being a point of contention. The argument is that a company shouldn't be able to incarcerate people because it should be the government's job. It's thought that if the prisons were adequately doing their job and rehabilitating people, then they'd be running themselves out the business. So the theory is that in order to continue operating, they can't properly provide the adequate facilities. In order to maximize profits, it's also been thought that they cut corners on things like hygiene and staff. Violent attacks are statistically higher in private prisons too, and the Vernons have just swapped out one business that keeps people in chains for another one that does the same. Bogged down the video there, mate, but Knight is obviously part of the elite, and he's a twisted version of Bruce Wayne. Whereas the Waynes help provide passage on the Underground Railroad, though, the Vernons profited off slavery. We will talk about the character more in depth at the mansion, but yeah, lots of things going on with him. Lots of weird things. Anyway, Frenchie's refusing to see Kimiko, and thus she spends most of the episode waiting for him. Cutting to VNN, we see that Vought are covering up Cameron Coleman's death. I was wondering last week why it was Firecracker that they used to stamp on the character, but now it makes perfect sense. She's completely replaced him as the anchor and is already spinning lies for Vought. This has given the character a place to push out her conspiracy theories. These include whether Jewish space lasers are influencing people, and they've even mocked up an image of a satellite which has a Star of David on it. Now this is of course a reference to Marjorie Taylor Greene, with her recently being asked about them by Emily Madalis. They got into a big discussion on conspiracy theories and a big argument, mate. Now, just before Mother's Milk turns it off, we see she's linking it to the ex-governor of California, Jerry Brown, along with the Rand and Mankiewicz Corporation, the latter of which sells kosher products. Now, gonna be honest, mate, gonna probably alienate both the women that watch this channel, yeah? But Firecracker, She's got boobs. Got boobs. I can't point this out without being sexist though, yeah? Because as we learn, she's been taking drugs that help her produce breast milk. You see, kids, when women get pregnant, their breasts fill with... I can't believe I'm explaining this. But you know. It makes sense that they've actually built that into a costume focusing around her cleavage. Try not to get cancelled. I do wonder if that was part of the thinking behind the design, with the zip especially, as it gives easier access for Homelander. Don't know if that's going to go down in theory time yet, but I've read multiple books on film analysis to bring you points like this. Anyway, these link in with the drugs that Frenchie found in her trailer, and she's basically been building herself up to be a mother figure for Homelander. Those pills are metoclopramide, which is designed to treat nausea and vomiting. I did wonder if that was connected to morning sickness, or if it was just a totally different thing. Either way, we later learn that the treatments make the heart slightly larger, so it may be in place to counteract that. I burst out laughing when he got sprayed in the face later on, and yeah, Star's reaction, absolutely priceless. Who's his favorite character? Mother's Milk. Nah, but he actually got his name in the comics because his mother was transformed into a giant Jabba the Hutt type thing, and she breastfed him, which then souped him up. It does feel like they've kind of switched that plot point over to Homelander, with it not being present for him in the source material. Now Milk listens to a mindful app in order to lessen the anxiety, and later on he has a panic attack. This is heightened by A-Train, who we learn's gone to Toronto so he can safely make a phone call. Toronto is of course in Canada, with it likely being outside Vought Americans' reach, exposing Coleman's being killed, and that Homelander's now putting together soups.
Like
An army?
Now this is the character arc that went on in the comics, with him using Herogasm as a way to try and recruit soups. Most of them attended the event, and thus it was here he had them all in one place. However, things were cut short when the CEO of Vought arrived, and he had to table his plans for a bit. Learning Sage was talking to Tech Knight, they hear he's having a party at his estate. Thus, they need to sneak into it, and we then get the introduction of Webweaver. Now, we have actually seen him in the series before, with his avatar popping up during episode 3. There he was a character in Mortal Kombat, which is what I'm calling it from now on. He was also mentioned later on as well, with the character being an informant. Now this is the second Spider-Man parody we've had from Amazon this year, with us also getting one in Invincible. Here though, they take it to the next level with him being a junkie. Now his web shooter is, let's say, more biologically accurate, with it being on his lower back rather than coming out his hands. At about 13 minutes 30, we see this is built into his costume, with him even having a hole out the back. Him having this hole explains why Tech Knight is also so interested in having him as a sidekick. He also doesn't mind having stuff shoved up where the sun don't shine, which explains why he could be interested. Now over at Tech Knight's mansion, we go to a location that we visited in the comics. Here they've changed him to be more of a Batman / Sherlock Holmes parody, whereas there he was more just the former. Debuting in the first Boys Omnibus during the Get Some arc, just like the show, he had a critical brain tumor. This made him want to stick his dick in every hole he sees, which the series plays off perfectly. Kicked out of payback for trying to hump Mindroid, we learned he'd sought out a therapist's help after obsessing over his sidekick Gladio. This is what the guy in the basement's called, with it being a nice tie to the source material, I guess. Now for this part of the video, I briefly want to go through the comic and talk about what happens to him in it. He was a founding member of Payback, and after he was suspended, we got into his obsession over holes. Turned out he'd once humped a chinchilla to death and was getting pretty close to going after his sidekick Gladio. Now in the show we learned that Vought moved away from sidekicks after Soldier Boy was thought to have abused gunpowder. Either way, the boys started to investigate him around the time they met the legend. We learned that Tech Knight and his old sidekick had a threesome with a Catwoman parody named Talon, who was shown during episode 1. This is when it crossed his mind, and Gladio left to become a Nightwing parody called Swingwing. Tech Knight got someone new, which is sort of what happens with Webweaver. Now Tech Knight actually applied to join the Seven, but he was rejected because of his tumor, whereas Homelander just sees him as less than. Now when the boys got to the mansion in the work, we saw his butler Thomas moving out. Tech Knight did something to his ear, and this caused him to resign. Here he's still in his employ, but we learn at the end he doesn't exactly enjoy his job. It's a revelation of prison camps that send him over the edge, with him taking the steps to take out his boss. Now the character's death is one of the funniest parts of the entire run, and I was a bit gutted they didn't bring it to the show. Walking along the street, he saved a mother and child from a falling wheelbarrow, and then chunks of a meteor began to fall to Earth. We learned that there was an asteroid heading towards us that was going to deep impact the planet. Flying out into space, Tech Knight saw a crevice and then started to hump it. This saved the entire planet, and Tech Knight was a hero to billions of people. Or so he thought. Turned out the wheelbarrow just smacked him on the head, and he hallucinated the entire thing as he was dying. Still though, nice way to explore the character, and we see his mansion, toys, and fancy clothes. Now if you want to get your own outfit for the party, then definitely check out our merch store right below the video. To celebrate the show, we're currently selling a Boys Inspired t-shirt that builds off the back of that classic Me and the Boys meme. On top of that, we've just launched an Alien Chestburster shirt just in time for Romulus, and also have ones for House of the Dragon. Theory time is there too, and huge thank you to everyone who's picked one up.
At the party, we see a returning character in Senator Calhoun.
He's someone we met in season 1 and was blackmailed by Vought after the shapeshifter doppelganger tricked him into a motel. We learn that he's the speaker now, with them doing 18 rounds of votes, and Vought likely muscled him in. In the comics, Vought had several government contacts, but it was Bobby Kennedy who got them kicked out of weapons manufacturing. Tech Knight then arrives and says,
Oh, Captain. My Captain.
which is a nod to not only the poem by Walt Whitman, but also when Ms. Marvel said it in the Marvels.
Oh, Captain, my Captain.
Saying they're the two top heroes, he's obviously trying to make them this universe's Superman and Batman. Homelander makes fun of him for not even being able to fly, with Batman of course also not having any powers either. Gonna ignore that little retcon they did recently where they said he was a meta-human for a bit. Now Ashley's been invited specifically by Tech Knight because we find out she's part of his little sordid stuff. Two people who matched each other's freak. Who gets drafted into this is Huey, with Kimiko describing him as a Times Square Elmo. His mask design is also more akin to an actual spider, with him also having fangs. Huey's tasked with lacing bugs throughout the house and luring Knight back to the stables. Seeing Tech Knight in the house, we watch as he rubs a tumbler with his finger. This is also something he did in Shetty's office in Gen V episode 4 when he came to film The Whole Truth. We learn Vought Plus have ordered a new season, and it'll be interesting to see if they spin this with Firecracker. Now we learn that Homelander wants to be here so they can convince the powers that be to pull off the 25th Amendment. This involves the Vice President becoming the President in cases in which the current one has either died or resigned. In the comics, Vic was set up as the VP to try and kill Dakota Bob, with them clearly referencing the story here. Sage is gonna be a key piece to it all, with her and Homelander urging Victoria to join them. In the end, Homelander crumbles and Sage is suffering from brain damage, so she can't pitch it. Vic really makes a deal with the devil here, but I wonder if she's part of something else. As we saw last week, she rescued Edgar, and the pair are probably trying to take down Homelander. Now I wonder if they have other contingency plans they can employ due to Edgar's psychological manipulation. I also wonder if the ankle bracelet means he'll be able to be tracked. Either way, she holds a very good poker face, and I think Homelander believes her. Upstairs, Tech Knight says he went to the Safdies to direct, likely referencing his new Tech Knight film. He says he's sick of the PG-13 bullshit, and Batman obviously had a major tonal shift in movies, going from Batman and Robin to the franchise reboot in Batman Begins. That was of course directed by Christopher Nolan, with Benny Safdie working with him on Oppenheimer. The Tech Knight is more akin to the Batman by Matt Reeves, and we learned last week it also had Nirvana on the soundtrack. Now, the library here leads into the Tech Cave, which is of course a big play on the Batcave. Entrances behind bookcases are things we've seen in Batman properties, with the most notably being in the 1966 show. This was then referenced in Batman Returns, and it's also a staple of the comics. Knight points out Uncle Tom's Cabin, which is a book about exposing the evils of slavery. It was actually banned in a lot of states, and I believe it's used here because we're exposing things about Tech Knight. Reaching as well, but I wondered if the slavery here has now moved over to sex slavery, which would possibly explain his fetish. Them film analysis books weren't a waste of time after all. Video is terrible. Now later on at 3851, we can see the book that opens up the cave. This is 120 Days of Sodom, which is an unfinished novel that describes all kinds of sexual deviances. Highly controversial, the film adaptation of it has also been banned in a lot of countries. Losing signal in the cave, the team outside decide to infiltrate the mansion. Now in it, we get something akin to the end of The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. Gonna be honest, mate, I don't think we can show much of it yet, but we do learn that Knight was raised by his butler after losing his parents, similar to Bruce Wayne. He also calls him Master Knight in the same way Alfred calls Bruce Master Bruce. He says there's nothing better than a father's guiding hand, with his hand also strangling him at the end. Now we thought Herogasm was a nightmare to edit, but this is even worse. That slime wipe later on, dear me, and we even have a GIMP possibly giving a nod to Pulp Fiction. Anyway, at the Seventh Tower, we finally meet Noir unmasked, with Nathan Mitchell getting to show his face. In case you don't know, Mitchell played him in the first 3 seasons, except for the scenes with his younger version. With this new person though, they get to show his face, and he actually gets to talk. He says he's having difficulty fitting into the role, and that he hates Saki. Noir had a Japanese-inspired side of him due to his sword, and we saw clips referencing this in the first season. He also mentions that there was nothing left of Noir other than Buster Beaver drawings. Deep can't figure out why, but as we know, he saw visions of these after his accident. New Noir says a black ninja's stupid and that he and the Deep weren't invited because they're not important. He says he's not even allowed to fly, even though he can do it. Not to get too spoiler heavy for what happens in the comics, yeah, in case you haven't read it, but Noir can also fly in that too. However, he was told he wasn't allowed to do it as it would expose who he really was, which I'll save for spoilers. Deep tells the new Noir that the last one used to get turned on by killing, thing, and the Deep says violence is power. This is something we've also seen reflected in Homelander. Violence and being threatening is the only way he knows how to control people. This is something we saw heavily with the people in the lab in episode 4, and also with Burke and his assistant last week. It highlights that he needs to be dominant in order to feel powerful, and this is why he crumbles a bit when people like Edgar stand up to him. Now with Sage and Newman, we hear a heartbreaking story by Sage in which she on paper cured her grandmother's cancer, but the people in charge refuse to take her seriously. She could cure cancer and reverse global warming, but there's no real point to it. I genuinely think that Sage is really working for her own ends, and in this series she's really getting revenge against Vought and the corporate system. Now we have a reason, with her grandmother's death sounding like it was horrifying. So far she's taken out Homelander's 3 biggest fans, Firecracker's psychic, led to Firecracker being beaten up twice, and said Cameron Coleman was the leak last week. I think she's definitely playing her own game and likely just wants to bring it all down rather than helping out the 7. It's clear she doesn't care about Firecracker at all and brushes her to the side along with Homelander. Really takes the cake at the end though, and yeah, never gonna look at a chocolate cake the same way again. Also in the basement you can hear the song Baker Street by Jerry Rafferty, with Baker Street being where Sherlock Holmes lived. Just trying to take my mind off the farting on the cake with some nice trivia. Ashley also says she's 100% a cannibal, which is something Armie Hammer was exposed for saying in messages that got him cancelled. He has spider words he shouts out, and his safe words later revealed to be Zendaya. This is obviously the actress behind Peter Parker's girlfriend MJ in the MCU. Beyond that though, she's also with Tom Holland in real life, so we have a double-layered Spider-Man joke there. Now what is easy to talk about is Kessler, who we learn returned home after the war to find the return of modernity difficult to adjust to. It's something that they discussed heavily in the Hurt Locker, with warfare completely changing someone. Who Kessler is really talking about though is Butcher. The comics also touched upon this too, with Butcher being an ex-soldier who somewhat became addicted to war. In the comics he talked about how he had this violent streak within him which Becca calmed down. That's why he loved her so much, however in her death it sent him further off the deep end. In the bathroom we then see Firecracker forcing a smile in the mirror. Personally I saw the parallels here with Homelander, who's often shown forcing himself to put on a happy face in mirrors. Outside she also threatens to laser Annie's tits, which is akin to how Homelander did it to Stormfront. Attempting to apologise to her, Annie ends up sedating her, which I think's gonna backfire. Seemed like she almost had a breakthrough, but yeah, no chance now mate. To You Can Do Magic by America, Tech Knight uses his powers of deduction to realise something's off with Huey. Coming across Sage in the library, Milk then ends up shooting her. However, as we know, her brain regenerates, and this sends her to a lower IQ state for the rest of the episode. We hear that Sage has been watching Janine and she's likely spying on the rest of the team. Milk ends up clenching his fists and releasing them, which is a technique taught to those who suffer from anxiety. It negates the fight or flight adrenaline rush by releasing blood and helps it to flow through the body again instead of causing the tension that anxiety often brings. Also, I love when Kimiko is just using the books to communicate her point, and in the end A-Train steps up as the hero. Dropping Milk off at a hospital, he sees a kid around his nephew's age who smiles at him. Guys went on a great arc in the season where you can see he's doing the right thing more and more as he goes on. Unfortunately, I think this is going to lead to the character's death, as I just don't see how he doesn't get caught. Dropping Milk off at the hospital is a big no-no, and Sage clearly suspected it was him. She said the footage didn't just run its way out of crime analytics, and also gave him a look when they were killing Coleman. Homelander later learns it wasn't him, and thus he starts to suspect the team once more. Again though, she seems to be keeping things stum, and likely taking out Homelander's supporters. She and A-Train were in the same group together, and now they've also been pushed into black at it. Noir is also getting annoyed with being in the 7 as well, as he's been shoved into the back and doesn't have a voice. I do wonder if they'll actually end up coming together and potentially act as a splinter within the group. Homelander likely won't be happy with how Sage flopped on him at the meeting, and she may even sacrifice herself to keep A-Train's secret. Still though, I feel like what's more likely is going to happen is that A-Train's going to get discovered and probably killed at some point. I guess no good deed goes unpunished, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on whether you agree or not. Homelander ends up rattling off about the woke mob and lots of culture war talking points, but this doesn't work on the elite. You kids might remember that earlier in the season I said they've got you fighting the culture war so you don't fight the class war. These culture war points don't work on the upper class because they're well aware of how everything works. I think they just want people fighting amongst themselves, as it'll stop them looking at the actual reasons of inequality. Homelander doesn't have any logistical plans on how to handle the stock market and oil reserves, which is where Victoria steps up. She says that the people are basically a labor force and that people are stupid, with corporations being the real superpowers here. I think it's the show really getting to the meat and potatoes of what's going on, and yeah, it's probably the deepest into society structures that the show's ever gone. Now in the basement, Ladio breaks free and they torture Knight by donating his money. In the end, we discover they're planning to use Knight's prison to create internment camps, which is something Kessler brought up to Billy. Earlier in the season, he talked about how the Supes will one day put everyone in camps, with it sort of being a reverse of Days of Future Past. Strangled by his butler, he says he always admired David Carradine, who died through... You know, every week, right, we spend days making these videos knowing that the slightest thing can get us demonetized. And I'm tired, mate. First Herogasm, now this. I'm just tired, mate. How am I going to pay my editors this week? Anyway, we jump over to Homelander's room, with him initially suspecting Firecracker as the leak. However, she really wins him round by showing that she's put her entire body through something to serve him. She did say she'd do anything for him, which is a line that she repeats here.
I'll do anything for you. Anything. Anything.
Cutting to the Flatiron, we see them listening to recordings of Newman. Huey also breaks down, missing his dad and the shock of what he went through in the tech cave. Speaking of shock, we then get the reveal that the disease would have to become airborne in order to be strong enough to kill Homelander. Samir refuses to do it because it would kill Victoria and his daughter and create a worldwide pandemic. Now the twist comes when Kessler tells Becca to shut up. We learn that Kessler died in Pangaea, with him being left there rather than being dragged out the pit by Butcher. He tells Butcher that everything he suggested is something he actually wants to do because he's his subconscious. We close out with him dropping his own classic Butcher quote, which then ends the episode.
Daddy's home. Daddy's home.
Now this also makes him closer to Homelander because both have this damaged psyche that's guiding them. Homelander's often had conversations with this in the mirror, and it's pretty much been his darker side embodied. On the other side of this, Butcher now has Kessler, with the two being even more linked than before. Such an amazing way to finish the entry, and that takes us into the spoiler section of the video, in which we'll talk about what could be coming down the line with how they use Kessler. Obviously, heavy spoilers ahead, and this will ruin at least the book for you. The show isn't one-to-one with it, but potentially this will spoil some of the things that happen. Either way, thank you for watching until this point. You guys are the real heroes. Now, after the death of Homelander, the work actually has two stories that follow it. The most recent of these is a book which is titled Dear Becky. This had Huey discovering Butcher's diary, and it basically outlined everything he was about. It's not essential reading at all, and yeah, just kind of an add-on if you want some DLC. Now why Huey has it is because of the quote-unquote final arc of the story. Butcher ends up becoming the villain. Murdering all the boys except for Huey, he then goes to the top of the Empire State Building. It's here he plans to set off a device that will kill all of the Supes on Earth. Now earlier in the work, when they travelled out to Russia, they went toe-to-toe with little Nina. Nina had been brought in by Vought because they were planning a coup on the country. Supes were gonna attack the Kremlin, and then Nina would come in and save the day. Setting off a radio device, this frequency would only affect people with B in their systems, and it would cause their heads to explode. Now you can see how that head popping idea has been adapted into other characters, and the device has now been changed to the virus. Either way, it was a one-size-fits-all solution that would kill every single Supe on Earth. Huey was going out with Annie in the comics, and this is why Huey was heavily invested. Billy was stopped by Huey and hurt really badly, and he talked it out with Huey in the end. He said subconsciously he'd kinda hoped Huey would stop him, which is why he left him alive. Huey reminded him a lot of Lenny, who'd always been there to hold him back. This is something that's happened in the show too, with Huey being described as Butcher's canary. Now Becca seems to act as the angel on his shoulder, whereas Kessler's the devil. Because of this, I feel like they're going to do something similar with Huey being the one who stops him in the end. However, Butcher needs someone to get him to the point where he's okay with committing genocide. I think that's where Kessler will come in, with him enabling the darker side of his personality. This is why he's been so focused
focused on creating the virus with him because that's ultimately what Kessler, or rather Billy's end goal is. Now I also think Kessler's here because it kind of gives this Butcher a bit more of a sympathetic side to him. I know a couple of people who read The Boys and weren't really feeling the way that Butcher turned on his mates in the last few issues. Killing Kimiko, mate, you've gone too far. However, Kessler being this sort of darker side adds more weight to why he did it. Also, Black Noir in the comics is a clone of Homelander, which is why the character is able to fly. So yeah, that's where I think they're going to go in the show, but obviously let me know all your thoughts below. Please drop a like on the video, and if you want to support the channel as a member of the Spoiler Society, then please click the join button. You'll get early access to some videos, and it goes a long way to helping us out. Now if you want something else to watch, you've also got a breakdown on screen of House of the Dragon right now, so definitely head over there right after this. The new episode has a lot to unpack from it, and huge thank you to everyone who's been watching them. But out of the way, I've been your host Paul, you've been the best, and I'll see you next time. Take care, peace.